Alright, hello, my name's Chet, and the application that I've been working on is called CollideFx, and it is a ballistics effects generator. So the main idea is that you've got this world, and the world is kind of like a big grid, and you can place discs on it. Each disc has a unit generator inside of it, whether that be an effect, or an audio input, or even a MIDI input. And the way that you place these discs in the world spatially determines the sounds that they make, the signal chain, the mix levels, and you can move them in real time, and they react with physics, they rotate, they collide with each other, and you can see the signal flowing from one disc to the next through these little objects called orbs. And I think that'll be pretty apparent once I get this thing started up. Here is a little graph of how the system works with little arrows and boxes and all that fun stuff. No one wants to talk about that, so let's get a demo going. You're greeted by this friendly little splash screen here, and it kind of explains how to go about playing with this. So, you see the mouse? Yeah. So you can start by dragging an audio input onto the world, and then you can alter that using effects. The mix level is determined by the proximity of these discs to one another, so let's get started with a simple example. So I throw an audio input in. That's good, thank you. And say we want to have a delay. You can kind of hear the delay, but as you bring it closer, it's much more apparent. Oh, nice. I think we're getting some ground loops.
There's the pad switch on the DI box.
I'm sorry?
The switch on the DI box, yeah. None of this.
Not even using that box.
Oh, you're not. Oh, sorry.
So,
that's really wrong.
I guess we're just going to kind of pretend that's not happening. But anyhow, this is a MIDI guitar, thanks to Gina and Roshan for letting me steal that. So you can not only control the audio, but also, let's get rid of this guy. And you can change the parameters of any of the MIDI instruments, and you can even have several MIDI instruments going at once. And you can kind of see how signals are getting passed from one to another. The square wave is currently passing its signal to the delay module. And that can be heard better if you shorten the attack and sustain a little bit. Sometimes the MIDI guitar plays whatever it wants. But the sine wave, none of the orbs that are sitting on the sine wave are getting passed anywhere. That's because it's not close enough to the delay. However, if I bring it closer, you can see that they start interacting with each other. So you can chain these signals together and make them arbitrarily complicated. Here's a reverb and a tremolo just to try something out. So that's fun. And so that's nice and convenient if you want to use live effects. Say you're just playing at home by yourself. Maybe you want to make a loop. Now the loop has switched over to input mode, and it is driving the reverb. And if you throw some more effects in, a delay, a chorus, you can instantly hear that the signal graph is being updated in real time. And so if you want to change the parameters of the chorus, make things a little wiggly, it can be fun just to toss a bunch of things into the world and see what they do. Say you want an effect, you want it to have some delay, you want it to have some chorus, but you don't really care too much what it sounds like. So I just kind of arbitrarily threw these on. We can do a ring mod, those are kind of weird. Sounds kind of weird. So one of the other modules I really like is the granular synthesis. I'm gonna get rid of that chorus if nobody minds. Try and isolate the granular so you can kind of hear what it does. I'm going to kill this guy for the time being. Let me know if I'm getting close on time. So it doesn't really resemble the input sound too much, and that's because the length of the granules is actually a major player in how the sound works. If you make the granules longer, it'll take more samples from the past input. So there's also the FFT if you want to take a look at whatever's coming out of any single one of the unit generators. You see the reverb's not doing anything because it's not close enough with others to interact. So let's have a little fun with this thing. We can throw a bunch of delays on and set all of their delay times to be different values. Let's get a couple more granulars on there because they're fun. Reverbs, tremolo. Let's bring a side wave back on. So you can get cool kind of sounds. You don't really have to know what you're doing. You can see that the signal chain is kind of snaking around the bottom and back up to that delay. But say you want a different effect that kind of sounds similar. Let's mix it up. Really loving that ground loop right now. Let's find a home for this guy. No place. Distortion. So that's kind of just a sine wave going through the distortion, and I'm going to try and wrap this up in a second because I feel like it's long. So you can get a bunch of different effects by just kind of randomly throwing things around. It's kind of fun to play with. So you take things off, you can see the orbs that represent the signal leaving the world. Heartbreaking. You can drag these off and then the orbs will kind of shed their way also. I think that covers covers things pretty nicely. Any questions?
And you don't really have like an output like hockey puck or whatever. So
That's
I was
correct.
wondering, like when you're chaining effects, how do you know which is the last effect in the chain to send like the output? Are you like keeping track of the order they're connected, or?
So any effect that doesn't have an output, or that doesn't have a nearby effect, is considered to be an output. So the granular synthesis, the blue one there, is right now the output because it has nowhere else to go. It's kind of quiet. Let's see if we can- But say I bring something else close enough, the distortion gets loud. And you can't really hear the chorus, but you bring it closer. You can really hear anything through the granular synth, but and now the chorus is the output. And now if you set them up like this, you can see that the signal splits, and every time it splits, it scales by square root of 2, so the signal doesn't keep getting louder for every split that you have. So right now the light blue and the really bright looking one over here are the outputs, and you can kind of tell where you're, if you've got like a really loud noise going on and you can't find it, the UGen discs light up a little bit, so you can kind of see it blinking a little, because it's tough to see much of anything on the projector, but so if any of them are just like brightly flashing, you can usually tell that that's a good way to start debugging where all the noise is coming from, if the noise bothers you. So another question?
Just out of curiosity, like how many lines of code are there? 'Cause it seems like a really massive project, like
Thousands.
Sweet.
Probably about 5,000 if you don't count RT Audio and OpenGL. I think it clears 20 if you do.
Yeah.
Wow.
Good job. You did a very good job of hiding a lot of the features from us through the milestones. And I want to applaud you for
The element of surprise is key.
for your element of surprise, but also for actually showing us enough to actually, along the way, to actually pass the milestones as well. So good job.
Thank
Awesome work.
Stay tuned for Guitar Face!
Guitar face.